A lot of the founders in this space are coming from a really deep technical background, which unfortunately means that very much trained to speak to other scientists and other technical folks rather than business operators. If we want these technologies to not stay in the lab and get adopted, we need business stakeholders to see the value in whether it reduces costs or whether it makes their process more efficient or just improves their work stream itself. It's about putting people first and just not being in the mindset of build it and they will come, versus the confidence that level that you have of people buying your product whenever it is ready by building the relationships and keeping the conversations open. The fundamental problem that I see is how do you speak and apply to the human who is interfacing with your innovation. I think it's like very fundamental, but I think it often comes down to that.
Hi, Akhila. Thank you very much for joining me on today's podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, What If Design?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. I am the co-founder and lead design strategist for What If Design. We are a design agency that works as partners for climate-focused companies. What that looks like in the day-to-day can be primarily in like 3 buckets. The first one being on the messaging communications piece of things, really helping like complex science-backed concepts that are very common in the climate space. How do we visualize them in a way that can provide business impact? How do we use language and basically create artifacts, whether that's through brands, websites, marketing collateral, sales decks, to basically help people feel that they need to use this climate solution. So the hypothesis there is that we wanna that the climate solutions are not very clear to the mass market, and I think we need to speak to a lot of stakeholders to speak to their personal needs of how does it make their job better or how does it make them look good, sort of thing, in order to like push it along. As you know, I mean, I think there are like a lot of different stakeholders in the space, so it's a very important piece to be able to speak to each and every one. um the second one is more on the UX side of things. So this is mostly for software companies. We basically do everything from user research to product strategy to UI design in such a way that it's like delightful and feels like people want to use it. I think like the best example would be maybe like EVs. I think the fact that they are now sleek and feel very seamless is a important part of the experience. Another piece to that is that we want people to feel like they enjoy and are delighted to use a climate positive solution rather than having to use something because they're like guilty about it. The third piece to things is more on the innovation side of things, where we help companies basically brainstorm and like think through what are different innovative solutions that you can create and conceptualize when you're thinking about new ventures that are more climate friendly. This typically looks like a stakeholder mapping, doing a lot of research, doing design thinking workshops, ideating, prioritizing different products, and then basically getting buy-in to then execute on building that solution.
So I'm curious to know what kind of patterns do you see across like climate deep tech teams when it comes to user experience and messaging, especially?
So the kind of companies we work with, I feel like they're super smart people. They are really deep into the research of whatever they're working on. For example, if you take like fusion or like carbon capture utilization technology or like rock weathering, these are not technologies that have existed for like centuries, right? So they're very much in the journey of being commercialized for mass market adoption, which means that a lot of the founders are in this space are coming from a really deep technical background, which unfortunately means that they're very much trained to speak to other scientists and other technical folks rather than business operators. But if we want these technologies to not stay in the lab and basically get adopted, we need business stakeholders to see the value in whether it reduces costs or whether it makes their process more efficient or just improves their work stream itself. The fundamental problem that I see is that how do you speak and apply to the human who is interfacing with your innovation is something that's not, I think it's like very fundamental, but I think it often comes down to that. Like for every piece of text that I see on a deck or every screen that I see, if the person who is making it just question themselves in terms of, is the other side the person who's like, on the other side of this artifact, how are they going to experience it? I think often that question is not asked, and I think that's a key issue. And from that, it stems out to, let's say we take a website. If you see so many climate tech websites, you will see big walls of text, big complex graphs, often like technical and engineering led folks. They think we want to like give like, they're coming from a place of credibility which is proven by data, graphs, and like, really a lot of information, and they think that it needs to be thrown out at their audience in the front, but like that's not really the case. You need to give enough information for people to say, hey, okay, now show me the graph, now I'm interested enough to really dive into the deep end of what your technology does. But like until then, I think that's how it manifests in like the messaging and visual piece of things.
I find the same thing myself on the marketing side. A big thing in marketing is about writing at the lowest reading grade level you can so that you reduce people's cognitive load. But it's easy to see why so many people from like an academic background or like an engineering background would want to be really specific with their language because they're trying to put across really complex terms. And I think it is a real shame that so many people still do that. I want to know, when it comes to telling their story or the company's story, where do you see that background helping or hurting them?
I think the credibility of the founding teams of a lot of these deep technology companies is already there. It's about not throwing everything you've done, but just basically connecting the story and connecting the dots of how is this relevant to the company that you're building and the problem that you're solving. So when we build any story, especially let's say for an about page, right? People typically say me, like look at me, look at all of my achievements. But honestly, the hero of the about page is the problem that you're trying to solve. It's not you. And everything that you say needs to speak to the credibility of why you're the right person to solve that problem. And that's the only intersection that matters, not whether you've written hundreds of journal papers before that, but what have you done that will make the end customer or user say, okay, this person knows, he's felt what I need to be solved. That's what we want to evoke. So I think whatever piece of information that helps you build that narrative, I think that's the key foundation that's important to build any compelling story.
Let's move quickly onto the UX side then. So you've talked before about how users only usually interact with about 25% of an app that's been built or a software that's been built. Why do you feel so many features go unused? And what is it the founders can actually do about that as well?
I'm not sure if that stat is like exactly right. I'm sure the exact number would be different, but I think often what happens in the space is that, especially in climate, when you don't have a designer involved upfront, you take a very development first approach to building your product, which means that sure, what's important to the customer is there, but then we see so many people coming to us when they've realized we've built like so many features that people are not really using. And this can be like, if you take like a big enterprise software as well, they might have a few customers. They're basically now at a point where the customers really see value in the product as well, but they probably don't know about the entire feature set that's even on the product. And the ones that they know as well, they're probably not using as much that's available to them, which means that you've put so much time and effort in building this product that people are not using. And that comes when people don't find something intuitive. Like, if it doesn't come to them naturally, how are they going to like adopt it in like their workflow, right? So people come to us when they realize that, hey, like, we've built a Ferrari, but it actually looks like a cycle. But our competitors look like a Ferrari, but they're actually a cycle in terms of feature sets, right? And we're still losing business to our competitors. So that's when basically like people realize, okay, UX is a legitimate field that needs to be implemented now. And when they realize that they're actually losing sales, that's basically when they end up like coming to us and they realize this. And often I feel like the value of bringing design to at the table like earlier on means that you're not wasting extra time in development or extra cost in development as well to build features that are not like the must haves and are probably just good to haves in early stages. So really it helps you prioritize what is important at what stage.
You touched on something there that I want to dig into with you a little bit. So you mentioned there that the design helps with the development side of things.
Yeah.
Can you, I guess, for all those people that feel like design is a logo or a website, can you kind of explain what design is and how it helps?
That's such a that's such a complicated question. I feel like design is a noun and verb, I think. And I think for a lot of people it can only seem like a noun, which can be like, a website or a graphic design poster or whatever. But I think it's a mindset of how you think as well, which is why I think design thinking got a seat at the table, became like a legitimate concept as well. Is that basically it's about building something that people want, right? Like, it's about putting your users in the front and center, whether that user is someone who's just viewing a piece of information, or whether that's like the end user of a product, or someone who's a customer who's even going through your sales journey, right? Like, when you say sales design, it means that you're designing the entire process of sales, right? From outreach to closing the contract, right? So designing is basically anything that you do in order to make the process smooth and for the people that are involved in it to get to a certain outcome. Now, obviously, like, it depends on like the kind of context, but the third pillar that I talked about, like the innovation side of things or the design thinking side of things, I feel like that's more messy, ambiguous, where you're trying to like solve like large strategic problems. I think it's a mindset of getting people involved from the get-go, I would say. But then there comes the noun of, having a clear artifact that you put as an output, which is probably more on the execution side of things.
You work with a lot of different teams at different stages, from like seed rounds to Series B.
Yep.
I'm interested like how your approach shifts depending on where a company is on that journey.
Mm. That's a great question. I think there's a lot of guesswork that's happening in early stages. Like, often because like a lot of these technologies that we're working with, they apply to multiple industries, right? So you're still guessing what is it that, if you're bringing that to the market, you're really guessing who would find the most amount of value in it, and then you'd go ahead and like do market research there. Versus in the later stages, you have a couple of customers already, you know why you get hired, you know which department of that industry values you for what as well. So I think one of the things that I've realized is that it's very helpful to have like a matrix of your audience versus what is the value that you're speaking to them. And that's really helpful because especially when it comes to climate tech, there are like a lot more stakeholders than like a traditional B2B SaaS would
Mm.
have. Right? You have like a procurement manager, you have someone on the operations, you have like a CMO who's worried about the brand experience, you have the CRO who's like thinking about is this is this like going to add revenue or not. So and you have to speak to all of them because a lot of these technologies, they're like not cheap. They're like 250K to install a piece of hardware probably, and then recurring subscription as well, or like, they're not small investments, right? So I think there's a lot of stakeholder convincing to be done, and I think having a matrix, doesn't matter which stage you are in, whether you're like the confidence level of what you're putting down on that matrix can be different, but then you go ahead and you validate it by speaking to people and like understanding why they would be interested in what you're building and how you need to change your technology to their use case in order for it to be valuable to them.
Yeah, it's that I like to think of it as that stage of you've now found product market fit. It's about finding product market message fit.
Yeah.
Because once you understand what the market wants, then you have to understand how you actually portray that value to them in your design, in the way that you speak, in your tone of voice, your branding, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned the sales and the stakeholders there. So what for you makes a great internal stakeholder for design and brand projects?
I think marketing managers, CMOs are really helpful because we're both like solving the same problem, right? They come in, they interface more with the customer side of things. They're integrated with sales teams, so they understand the industry very deeply. Um, and we often like help them execute on that in such a way that it's aligned with the kind of messaging that they want to put out and the kind of brand they want to embody as well. And it's also helpful because they're often advocates for us um with CFOs or with, the CEO or other executive team members as well. But typically our champions and whom we work with directly are also like CMOs.
What is it that you think founders can learn from them?
I think again it's about putting people first and just like not being in the mindset of build it and they will come versus the confidence, that level that you have of people buying your product whenever it is ready by building the relationships and keeping the conversations open is going to be very different from you going into a silo and like building a piece of hardware and then putting it out in the market and not getting as much traction. Obviously, in the hardware space, there is a less number of iterations that you can do compared to software. So it is a more challenging space to be in. But I think just not ignoring the champions and the influencers, customers, users while you're building your product is very important. Like even if you're like TRL like less than TRL 5, which means that you're still like validating, piloting, you're not ready for like, mass like deployment. I think it's very important to keep showing your progress. Today, build in public is a very open and like accepted concept, but I think build like it doesn't have to be built in public, it has to be built with the stakeholders that you need to engage with. For example, like this is not a climate tech example, but so we recently also worked with like a biotech company, and they are doing incredible research in the cancer space, and super smart founders, like something really smart that the founder did is that, and like in biotech, I have also been recently enlightened that the timelines are really long because there's a lot of like, clinical trials you need to go through, approvals, all of that is just a really long process, right? And I think there are a lot of like analogous um journey timelines you can take within climate as well. Like you're first in the lab, then you have to test it for it to be like a viable technology. Then you have to test it in the same environment in a pilot. And once that happens, that's how you move along the technology readiness level. And then it moves to a place where companies are ready to actually buy it as a viable product and deploy it at scale, right? So something that she did that was super smart is that she went and spoke to Series A investors and asked them what they would want to see when she came to them. And she was really raising a seed round. So when her now potential seed investors asked her, "What are you going to do with the money we give you?" She was like, my future Series A investors have told me that these are the milestones they want to hit, so that's what we're gonna um, aim for, and like those are our milestones, because she fundamentally knew that, when you go to VC, their objective is to raise the next round so that your
Mm.
valuation keeps upping, right? So it was a very clear story, and that only happened because she was able to map out who along their journey, who are the stakeholders that are going to come in, at least on the investment side of things, and what do they want, and how do we bridge that in today's messaging. So I think that's a really smart way to think about how do you build trust, because a lot of these technologies are not real yet, right? So how do you build trust for something that's not out in the world already? You wanna you wanna get multi-stakeholder feedback early on and keep like something as simple as maybe like running a newsletter for every coffee chat that you have with like a potential future stakeholder is also something that could be help to that. But I think, yeah, again, putting people at front and center and carrying them along, I think, is a very powerful tool.
What kind of signals tell you that a company is ready to invest in design as a growth driver rather than just a visual facelift? And like, what is it that founders should look for in their own companies to tell them they might be reaching that stage?
I think typically when they hire like their first marketing manager is like a good sign that they realize that, okay, this is a field and we need visibility now. And what typically happens is founders get to a place where they realize, okay, now the technology is viable, it's feasible. There's no technology and financial de-risking that we need to do anymore. And once that's been done, I think it's a point of getting more visibility to the work you're doing, right? So that's when they realize, okay, now we need to have someone in marketing who's championing this. And when the marketing person comes in, they realize, yes, visibility is what I'm here for, but our current materials, our current assets are just not at the place where we need to be. Obviously, messaging comes in through all the feedback, all the customer interfacing that they've done so far, but also we need to drive visibility to assets that show the credibility of the work we've done. Like often the companies we speak to, we hear this a lot, that our website is like way behind where we are as a company, because they've evolved so quickly, and they've probably gotten market traction, and are like, the messaging is clicking, all of that is like falling into place, but it feels like what they have out there is behind it. So I think that's when we kind of come in, and signal wise, typically that comes as like a marketing hire.
When a client comes to you saying, we need a new website, what do you typically ask first?
Why? Like I think it's like, why, like it depends on like I obviously do some research in terms of why they would possibly be reaching out. And like sometimes it's pretty clear because they probably had like a Wix template that they built when they first incorporated their company or something. But I think understanding the goals of what is it that you want to drive after this, and how is the website going to feed into the other channels you're going to be investing in after, is like super crucial to understand, because you're most likely driving them to the website or to like a page on the website, right? So understanding whom are you speaking to, like what is the main goal and objective of like a revamp or whatever you're doing, and what do you hope it'll deliver you with, and how is the website going to drive your future investment into visibility activities, is like a key understanding that we try to get. I've seen people charge, like I know people who charge like hundreds of thousands of dollars for a website too. I've People charge tens of thousands, people charge thousands as well. So like it's very important for a business, especially in a market like this, to stay agile and stay lean and really invest in what you need based on where you are in your journey, right? So I think understanding that is very important for us before we like start designing.
Is there any like commonly held knowledge around brand or design that you wish people understood better?
I think the purpose of brand is very important for you to define for yourself. I think having a strong brand, whether that's visually appealing or through like a LinkedIn profile or through whatever, is about building trust and credibility and showing that you're the right person to do the job, or the right company to do the job of whatever you're solving for. Now, yes, great visuals help, but I commonly perceived as beautiful visuals, which is, yes, maybe part of the case, but like it's not 100% of the job. So like for example, like you can see a lot of like, I feel like a lot of like, I'm here in San Francisco, I see a lot of like, really techie companies have really cool websites, but like if you ask someone what do you think they do, you might not really get a clear response, because like the clarity of why and what you're doing is still missing. Like I feel like the purpose of a brand or a website or any artifact that you put out needs to be for people, again, to the baseline of like, this is like, it should evoke the feeling of this is made for me, this is what I was waiting for, sort of thing, right? And I think that gets missing when things are beautiful and pretty, but not really speaking to the audience that you want to really drive sales, conversations, pilots, whatever the next steps look like.
You mentioned LinkedIn there, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this. So you had a massively viral lead magnet go out that you shared around climate tech events. What did you learn from how people responded to that, and what would you do differently next time?
Wow. Okay. I think I learned a lot of things, how on like execution and stuff, but also in terms of how people respond to you. I feel like for content specifically, relatability needs to come on top. And I still struggle with this, but I think there needs to be a good balance of relatability and education, and yeah, and just like, conversion focused content probably. But I think that's also a reason why like Gen Zs are doing so well in the content game, because they're probably more, I mean, I think authenticity is just key just generally, but I think a lot of the Gen Z folks are not afraid to put things out in a raw format and like not polished format, which makes them feel like they're more of someone whom you're spending your day with, rather than someone's on the other side of the world and just appears on your feed, right? So I think relatability as being a key important thing for anyone to resonate things with is very important, because I think the reason why it went viral was because it came from a constant feeling that I had that, hey, like there are like a ton of events that are happening all the time. I can't make it to all of them. It's expensive to attend most of these. I would love to know how to prioritize what is important, because also it came from a fact that, there are a lot of generalist conferences which might not always be super useful. But when you're like, further along in your growth journey, you want to get into, I don't know, cement conferences or steel conferences, or like whatever industry you are specifically targeting, that's probably way more important for you, right? So I think it came from that fact of like, hey, there's so much happening. I need to know what to prioritize. So I was like, how could I help? And I think that's when I started putting that list together, and kind of that's how it went viral. But I think another thing that I realized is that when you put something of value to people out there, because it took a lot of time for me to put that together, people recognize that, and I think credibility comes from there as well, that this person knows the industry and is trying to put value out first.
Yeah, the relatability aspect is and the authenticity is really important. My final question for you is if you had one piece of advice for yourself 5 years ago, what would it be?
It would be just do it. Like it would be like, don't get in your head, just do the thing. Like I think I still struggle with it, and I feel like we often tend to like strategize so many things before getting out, and it is important to think about the direction that you're heading at and like overall arching way of like how are things going to work, and all of that does matter. But I think it's very easy to just get into that loop and not execute it. Like you can think about 10 different things that need to be done, but at the end of the day, if you're not like if you're not putting it out there, it will like it doesn't lead to anything, right? Like I have a ton of ideas that I want to implement for what if, but they're all stuck in a Notion board right now because like there's no time for it. Or like you think you want to do different things, but like if you're stuck in your head and like it doesn't come out of the world, like I think that's a sad reality that happens. So I think the team we're building is super strong. Everyone's really smart, humble, exceptionally skilled. But I think we need to get, I think the concept of treating perfection as a result of iteration is very important.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate this conversation, Akila. How can people find out more about What If, look at the work that you've done, get in touch?
Yeah, best place is our website, whatifdesign.co. People can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. So I think that those are the two top spots.
Cool. Anything else you want to finish up with?
I think just general advice for people who are like thinking about this space. I think I attended like a writing workshop last week, which was incredibly helpful for reflection. Shout out to Ritika, who's been like conducting really mindful spaces to think through what you're doing. And I think it's easy to get lost in what you've like how far you've come. Like it's easy to get lost in like the day to day and like ignore how far you've come. But something that came out of that was that, especially for people who are trying to like join climate, I know the time right now is pretty tough, but like educate yourself and keep pushing forward. I think there's a place for everyone. It's a multi faceted problem with so many different skill sets that are needed. So I think my only advice would be to like educate and see where you can fit in, because I think there's a space for everybody um, to find meaningful work.
Akila, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Chris. This is great.